Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Memorial Day weekend. I think a lot of people are probably at the cabin or on their way up to the cabin for the start of summer. Down here in the cities, the lilacs are a little bit past prime. So I always kind of love it because they are good here. And then as I move up north over the course of the summer, the lilacs sort of go with us. Um, so today we are really excited to have Dorothy Whitmer, who is a member of the Gull Lake Chain of Lakes Association and an MLR member. And we were emailing back and forth a little bit about shoreline restoration and the importance of shoreline restoration and what that means and what a healthy shoreline looks like. And she agreed as a volunteer to kind of help us take this Lake Steward program that she was working on for Gull Lake statewide. And I said, well, let's do a webinar. And so she said, great. A couple of house cleaning or house cleaning items. If you look, you'll see an attendee chat. I assume you all can hear me. Give me a thumbs up if you can. You'll see the emojis up there. Oh, okay. I see them coming in. And then you see the chat button. If you have a question, go ahead and ask it. And then maybe at the end, we can open it up for questions and we'll go back and forth. And of course, you have my email number, and Dorothy's is right there. And Dorothy, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and share it with everyone.
Well,
And so I'll turn it over to you now.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for coming to hear about the Lake Steward program of the Gull Chain of Lakes Association. I'm Dorothy Whitmer, the Lake Steward program coordinator. I would love to hear from you. Email me, lakesteward@gcola.org. I do need there we go. Gull Chain of Lakes Association, GCOLA for short, is a nonprofit volunteer organization. On our website, gcola.org, you can find our many programs in safety, recreation, and the environment. But one of our core missions is clean water. Lake Steward is about water quality. If you're thinking of starting a Lake Steward program, launch it now. It's the month of May, more people are coming up to their cabins, and you can set up the program in just a few hours. I'd be happy to help, just email me. Now, why 2020? Well, it's been a terrible year. But what better time to get back to nature? And the Lake Steward program is not about crowds of people indoors. It's about individuals, their family stories, and their relationship to the land. Because what happens on lakeshore determines what happens to the water quality of the lake. The Gull Chain of Lakes is located at the border between the eastern broadleaf forest and the mixed evergreen forest. So on our lake, a Lake Steward natural lakeshore looks like this. This is our ideal. You have native trees, shrubs, and ground cover with deep roots that hold the soil. When it rains, you have the least runoff of silt and nutrients, so it is the healthiest lakeshore for water quality. In the photo, there's even a dead tree, which will fall into the water and be left there for wildlife habitat. But all too often, we have lawn down to the lake. How do you get from here to here? Well, you cut down all the trees, remove the stumps, pull out the shrubs, and then you use herbicide to kill the ground cover. Then you plant your crop of grass. It has short roots, mow it to keep it nice and short. And now what you have is a high level of runoff of phosphorus from the soil and nitrogen from the fertilizer. Perfect conditions for the growth of algae in the water. And with all those nutrients, if an invasive plant like Eurasian water milfoil were to get into the lake, growth would take off and choke off the beaches, docks, and lifts. And this landscape offers no shade or wildlife habitat. So if you love birds, there's nowhere for them to live. And if you put up a birdhouse, there's nothing for them to eat. Birds are also under threat from mosquito insecticide spraying, which kills the insects that our birds need for food. So if expansive lawns on lakeshore are harmful for the water, expensive to maintain, they're work when you could be enjoying the lake, and they're poor habitat for wildlife, why are we doing it? Well, in order to answer that question, We have to look at the problem in a completely different way. Dale Carnegie said, "The only way on earth to influence people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it." So let's talk about what every homeowner wants, especially in regard to a lawn. So from left to right, it's familiar. I know how to do it. I feel in control. It's neat and tidy. The view. I take pride in my lawn, and because others must feel the same way, I will be admired. And my personal favorite reason for a lawn: squirt gun fights. Here's my grandson, locked and loaded. In the Lake Steward program, we talk about what people want, and that's what makes it so powerful. And if there's one thing we all agree on, it's to protect and enjoy the lake. Lake stewards can have lawn, but they also have more time to do cool stuff with their families and more money left over for squirt guns. And if you like to fish off the dock, lake stewards catch more fish because they have better fish habitat. The program has 3 steps. First is a quiz to get people involved and get them thinking. Next is a site visit to visit the property, and then we make an award, the Lake Steward sign. The sign generates publicity, and that encourages more people to get involved. So the program creates its own momentum. Let's start with the quiz, getting people involved. That turns out to be easy because we're a lake association and we're talking to our members about what they want. How does it work? Advertisers will use a quiz as clickbait, or it's bait, to get you to click on something so they can sell you a t-shirt or some auto insurance. So here's an international landmarks quiz that I pulled off the internet, 2 photos, and then the question: do you know what either of these are? Take the quiz here. And what they're hoping is that it's raining, you're bored, and you think, the pyramids of Egypt, Rio de Janeiro, I got this, click. The Lake Steward quiz is based on Score Your Shore, which is a quiz on the Minnesota DNR website, Department of Natural Resources. Here's their diagram of a typical lakeshore lot. Let's call it 100 feet across for today. And the 3 zones: aquatic, where if you stand, your feet get wet; shoreline buffer zone, from the water's edge landward 25 to 50 feet, and the upland zone, from the edge of the shoreline buffer zone, and we're using all the way back to the access road. The upland tends to be the largest zone, but the shoreline buffer zone may be the most crucial in absorbing and filtering runoff and protecting the lake from silt and nutrients. Score Your Shore asks what percentage of native plants is in each of the 3 zones, and there are 10 questions. We decided to simplify the quiz to only 4 questions, so we call it the Score Your Shore mini assessment. And we put the most important questions first because we weren't sure whether people would complete the quiz. Each question is 100 points for a total of 400. Dave Anderson, who's our IT specialist, set up the quiz on SurveyMonkey. It's easy and it's free, and they even collect the data and chart it for you. Once the quiz was in place, we put a paragraph about the Lake Steward program on our website with a link to the quiz, and that's all we needed to launch Lake Stewards. Our kickoff was Memorial Day weekend a year ago. We sent out an email to all 1,000 GCOLA members introducing the Lake Steward program and asking them to click the link for the quiz. I told myself not to expect anything to happen, but wouldn't you know, it rained that weekend. People were sitting at their screens bored, and some of them clicked. And when they did, they were taken to the quiz. Let me go through the 4 questions with you. First and most important, do you use fertilizer and/or lawn chemicals such as weed killer? Yes or no? No is 100 points, and you can see that the majority is not doing these harmful things. I knew right then that we were going to have some lake stewards on board. We also added these educational sentences. We highly recommend no broadcast spraying of insecticides and pesticides. Please be kind to pollinators, but you could put in your own educational sentence. The other 3 questions were about the 3 zones of the lakeshore lot, starting with the most important, the shoreline buffer zone. from the water's edge 25 to 50 feet landward. What percentage of the buffer is unmowed and or contains native plants? There were 5 possible answers, 0, and then those 4 quartiles. We also put in some grade inflation so that if you had only 5% native plants, you got 25 points. And here again, the majority had the best quality buffer zone. Now the upland zone. From the shoreline buffer back to the access road, what percentage is native plant cover? Same answer choices. Here we saw more variability in the answers, but almost 3/4 had half or more of the upland in native plants. The last question was about riprap, which is loose stones that are stacked to form a breakwater. To get 100 points, you either had to have no riprap or allow plants to grow in it to stabilize the shore. 85% scored the 100 points. After completing the 4 questions, quiz takers were given a score with points calculated by SurveyMonkey. Then we added 3 questions. Are you interested in becoming a lake steward and being given a beautiful lake steward sign for your lakeshore? Everyone who left contact information said yes. We had a comment box, which was a great idea. We got good comments from that. And an email is very important because without contact information, the person is lost to the program. On Monday of Memorial Day weekend, I went to the SurveyMonkey app, took a deep breath, and logged in. There were over 100 responses. 100% of people completed the quiz. It took an average of 2 minutes. About half left an email address, so that meant we had 50 people to follow up on. Let's say that those who take the quiz and leave an email address are enrolled in the Lake Steward program. Let me back up for this one slide to mention some other ways that people enroll in the Lake Steward program. After we set up the quiz, but before we sent out the Memorial Day email, we contacted people we knew who had natural lakeshore and asked them to take the quiz. It was only 10 people, but they all became lake stewards. I went kayaking along my lakeshore and left 2 dock cards, which are handwritten cards saying how much I admired their lakeshore and asking them to go online to take the quiz. Both of them became lake stewards. We had a fundraising gala in July. Let me show you this and the quiz on the back, where we put a paper copy of the quiz on the tables, and that yielded 25 enrollments. This year, the same printed copies of the quiz could be mailed out if desired. We have about 90 people enrolled in the program so far. However the quiz results came in, I sent a thank you email to everyone who enrolled. We personalized the emails by responding to comments they made and encouraged them to become lake stewards. We requested a site visit. Step 2 in the Lake Steward program, the site visit to the property. This is a good time to introduce our team. On the left is Chris Dreesen, AIS detector, that's aquatic invasive species, and a self-described amateur master naturalist. But there's nothing amateur about her. Chris identifies the native plants on lakeshore because native plants have the deeper roots and filter runoff better. She also looks for invasive plants because they can crowd out the natives and destabilize the lakeshore. On the right is Sheila Johnston, GCOLA board member and environmental committee chair. She runs many programs, including shoreline restoration and our loon programs. So she has a lot on her plate, and she is our fearless leader. And myself, I'm also an AIS detector. I should mention that none of the 3 of us was awarded a Lake Steward sign last year. Chris and Sheila grew up together on Gull Lake. They're lifelong best friends, and they seem to know everybody. On a Lake Steward site visit, we try to send 2 rather than 1 of us, so there's agreement on an award. In 2 hours or less, we can see 4 properties grouped in one part of the lake to cut down on travel time. We take lots of photos, but just a few measurements, and it only takes 10 or 15 minutes at each location. We like to see a shoreline buffer zone of at least 25 feet because that's the healthiest for water quality. It's okay to have a beach, boathouse, or any other impervious surface that water runs off at the water's edge. but it can only extend along the shore for 25 feet on a 100-foot lot. The upland can be no more than 50% seeded or sodded grass lawn, although that's done by estimation. Even with these criteria, you quickly find that rules were made to be broken. A site visit is an opportunity to talk to people about what is important to them and what the land means to them. Here is a protective buffer zone with native plants. Further back from the buffer zone, there was an indentation in the land where there'd been a path for the wagons that brought the mail early in the last century. After the site visit, I send another email thanking them and describing the zones and plants on the property. Either they're awarded a Lake Steward sign or we discuss the lake-friendly parts of the land and ways to improve. We've noticed on site visits that people tend to fall into three groups, which I'll call A, B, and C, according to their thinking. And the groups roughly correlate with their score on the Score Your Shore mini assessment. My point here is that you must have all three groups for a successful program. There's a tendency to hang with the group A, already there. They're our core supporters today, right now. They live and breathe being lake stewards. They often have great stories to tell about being misunderstood by their neighbors. Our hope is that with the Lake Steward program, any misunderstanding will turn into admiration. Group B wanna be lake stewards. Referring to my earlier quote, instead of talking about what they want, we need to show them how to get it. Wannabes are the people who are giving the program immediate results. And Group C curious are the ones with lots of questions and we owe them answers. They are the future of the program. Now on to the award. The Lake Steward sign. We gave out our first few Lake Steward signs before anyone knew what they looked like. And it was so gratifying to see the look of astonished delight on the faces of the awardees. We'd seen an idea for a sign, and we took that idea to a talented local artist and sign maker here in the Brainerd Lakes area. She designed this artwork of all native wildlife. There are wildflowers, cattails, sedges, and Chris asked for a turtle and a frog. The sign is 12 by 18 inches, an 1/8 inch thick, with PVC core and aluminum on each side. It's heavy and tough. Got one here. The thickness. And I cannot bend it. There is clear coat protection from UV light to keep the design from fading. That feature turned out to be a significant expense. There are 2 holes for mounting top and bottom and a white space at the bottom for the logo of your lake association. They're $45 each. It was easy to drop them off at the back door with prior arrangement with the lake steward. Dropping off signs in person was really fun. I saw a lake steward neighbor of mine on his dock with a huge number of kids from their extended family. I kayaked over and without saying a word, just handed him the sign. He raised it over his head, pumped it 3 times, and everyone cheered. How's that for pride and admiration? These lake stewards had written in the comment box, "So glad to see this." For the awardees, it's validation at last. So how does the award generate publicity? We send out a 35-page newsletter 4 times a year. Here's a photo story Sheila did showing a number of our proud lake stewards at home with their signs. And if you need content for your Lake Association newsletter, lake stewards have a wealth of stories. Here's one I wrote called "The Home of the One-Legged Chickadee, a Lake Steward Tale." You can find all of our Lake Steward content on our website under News, starting with our spring 2019 issue. Maybe the best publicity is the sign itself. It's there for everyone to see, and we can even direct attention to it, as in the next slide. This has just gone to press for our June issue of the newsletter, which goes out to every property owner on the Gull Lake chain, not just the G-COLA members. I made a Google map with all 23 of last year's Lake Steward locations marked. The title, "Cruise the Lake and Find the Lake Steward Signs." The intent is to draw attention to the signs and to the desirability of the natural lakeshore. Joan Nassauer of the University of Michigan School of Environment and Sustainability writes about how to change the culture when it comes to environmental issues. You start with the initial adopters and grow the Lake Steward idea. When you get to 15%, you reach a critical mass, and soon everyone's a Lake Steward, even the golden retriever, Luna. Now I'd like to tell you a true story. A few years back in my lawn fertilization days, I was looking at my email and a quiz popped up. Rate your shoreland. It was from the Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council in Michigan, because that was my childhood lake experience before I married a Minnesotan, and I'm still a member. The quiz was intended for the inland lakes of Michigan. And I thought, shoreland? I got great shoreland. It's neat and tidy, green from all the fertilizer. I'll just enter my Minnesota lakeshore information into the Michigan quiz, and I'll get a great score. Click. Well, you can probably guess what happened. I was proud, way overconfident, and I tanked. And after that, I wasn't proud of my lawn anymore, but I was lost about what to do. The quiz I had clicked on was on mishorelandstewards.org. Here's a screenshot. And I highly recommend that you go to the site and take the quiz or look at the questions. They're going to ask you to type in the name of your lake, but I just typed the letter Z 5 times and it worked. So don't be intimidated. On the site is a comprehensive quiz with everything: septic systems, pet waste, even fire pits, because the ash has so much phosphorus in it. The 38 questions take about 30 minutes to complete. Michigan doesn't give you a score, but they give you a category. You're either a beginner or a medal level, bronze, silver, or gold, and they tabulate the answers. Michigan is keeping track of the data. I thought the quiz was eye-opening, but I couldn't figure out how you could get lakeshore owners to take the quiz. At the end of 2018, I'd done some studying, I made up a list of questions, and I called Julia Kirkwood, who wrote the quiz, Rate Your Shoreline. She's with the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. She was kind enough to talk to me for 45 minutes about the big picture view of shoreland management, banding together with other states to create a partnership. She had used Minnesota's Score Your Shore as a basis for the Michigan quiz and a Wisconsin framework for the Glacial Lakes Partnership. When I asked her how they could get shoreland owners to take the quiz, did they have billboards? She laughed and said, no advertising budget. They created shoreline educator programs and had volunteers go out and give talks to lake associations, but there was no leadership on the ground and they had to give it up. It wasn't working for them. So here's the situation as we had it. Michigan has an online quiz that's comprehensive. The results are collected and go into a database. Minnesota has Score Your Shore on the DNR website. Cass County, my county, put out this glossy booklet about shoreland management, and they and other counties have great programs for shoreline restoration. All these resources at government levels, but we're not getting traction. Something is missing. You know what it is. It's us. It's me. We can start here and we can start now. What do we see in this photo by our first lake stewards? Are we thinking, hey, those people haven't mowed their lawn? Or are we letting ourselves see real beauty for the first time? I didn't know what I was getting myself into with the Lake Steward program, but one of my mottos that I taught my grandsons is, every day do something you've never done before. For today, it's this webinar. With Sheila's help and using the Michigan quiz as a model, I pitched an idea to the GCOLA board of directors. They embraced it and funded it, and Lake Steward was born. And now the epilogue. Last summer, I was walking down to the water on these stone steps, and I saw these wildflowers, which turned out to be snapdragons. That was my favorite flower when I was a kid. In 30 years of being on this land, I had never seen them because I had never allowed them to grow. And then when I stopped mosquito insecticide spraying, there was more food for the birds and the hummingbirds came back. No bird feeders needed. Nature is supplying the food. And finally, even the squirt gun fights are more fun because with more trees, there are more places to hide. Thank you for being here. I'd be happy to take questions.
Well, thank you so much, Dorothy. That was wonderful. And I saw that we have a distinguished guest on the webinar today, Paul Radomski, who works for the DNR. And Paul and I have talked for years about shoreline restoration and how to get it done. So I'm sure he's glad to see this. And Paul wrote a book, came out in 2014, and we've put this in some of our emails and kind of promoted it a little bit. It's called Lakeshore Living: Designing Lake Places and Communities in the Footprints of Environmental Writers. And I'll share this with. Paul says Paul's weighing in here. I'll read what he has to say about his book. He says, hold on a second, let me get there. He says, great work. We crafted Score Your Shore in 2012, but got no funding to moving it forward. Good to see your efforts. So this is a great example of the DNR doing something and then citizens picking it up and carrying it forward. So in this book, in Paul's book, Lakeshore Living, just to give you an idea of how important what you're doing is, Dorothy, he writes, stormwater runoff is considered a major source of water pollution and may be responsible for up to 15% of river and lake water impairments in the United States. That's a really big number. Lawn to lake shoreline allows 7 to 9 times more phosphorus to enter the lake than an undomesticated, naturally vegetated shoreline. A lawn to lake lot has been estimated to average 0.2 pounds of phosphorus per summer, compared to 0.03 pounds per summer for a lot with naturally vegetated shoreline. It's a dramatic difference. And I have a story. Our place is on an island in northern Minnesota on Lake Vermilion. And on this island, there are 2 lakes. And you can hike back into them. They're about a mile back in the woods. And one of them is about 15 acres large and very shallow, maybe, 6 to 10 feet deep. And then there's a rock berm. And on the other side of that, just 20 feet away, is another lake that's about 15 acres in size, but at its deepest, it's about 70 feet deep. And it's a great fishing lake. People just don't fish it. You can go there and kind of catch fish at will. And my cousin came up last summer, and he hadn't been up north for many years. And we walked back there to go fishing and got there, and the whole thing was green algae scum. And we'd never seen it like this. I mean, the lake has always been gin clear. You can see 30 feet down forever, and he never remembered seeing it like that. But what had happened was there had been an easement that had been put in when the land was first developed. Somebody realized this and bought a lot on the lake, and they developed about 30 feet of it. And there was runoff in 1 year. And the lake is 70 feet deep. So that's how much phosphorus can run off of just one lot. It has a huge impact. I can't prove it, but that's the only thing that's changed. And I've been going to this lake for 50 years, so it makes a big difference. I had um, a question about the Score Your Shore for the DNR Score Your Shore. Do people that are doing the Lake Steward program, do they ever go back and use that tool?
We haven't. There's such a richness of questions and things that you can look at from both the Michigan quiz and Minnesota's. And we had to make a decision, because we really are ignoring some other important issues. but we had to decide. We thought trying to get people involved was more important than trying to do everything. So it's the best is the enemy of the good.
Right, right,
You don't want to go after perfection because then you lose the big picture. And as far as making people lake stewards, once you've gone to their property, you've met with them and you know them, and or you can meet with them by phone this year. Um, you don't really want to turn them down if their hearts are in the right place. So it's a hard decision. The properties that are lake stewards are going to have a sign out there maybe for a long time. So it needs to be a good example. But you don't want to be a stickler about, the number. It's not a numbers kind of thing.
right.
It's, are they trying to do the best thing for the lake?
And is there a charge for being in it? Or does the Lake Association cover the cost of the signs?
We thought about, there are probably different ways you could do it. We thought about having the lake stewards pay for half the sign. But we decided that the goodwill was worth so much more. So we gave away all the signs for the first of the 23 signs. So far, we do have funding, so I would like to continue to do that because people are so excited. It's like that story I told about him pumping the sign over his head. I mean, people are just thrilled about it. You can't buy that with money.
Right,
So
right.
I would like to keep giving the signs as long as we can afford it.
And maybe Paul can answer this question, but your goal is to have 1,000 lake stewards on Gull Lake. Do you
Yeah,
know how property owners are on Gull Lake? I mean, what
we
percentage?
we think it's about 2,000 properties, and 1,000 of them are GCOLA members. So if you look at Joan Nassauer's data, about 15% is the sort of the critical mass. It'd be nice to have 150 signs around the lake. But
Right,
what's really interesting about what happens, I've looked at the lakeshore, and sometimes there are areas where the three properties in a row are all natural. And all of a sudden, three of them in a row have lawns. And I remember when I first came up here 30 years ago, we had the prior owners had a lawn, and to the right and the left of us was lawn. But in my area now, we have, if you just take the 2,000 feet of lakeshore near me, we have 600 feet of lake stewards. So the people with the lawn are starting to get hemmed in. And I hope that they'll look at me like, whoa, those people don't have a lawn. What are they doing? What's going on? What's that sign? And the sign is, I think, disarming and beautiful. It's not like, oh, you're not doing what we're doing. It's
right.
kind of it's a pretty sign, and it draws you in, and you want to be part of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really lovely sign. And the link between what's happening on the shore and the fishing habitat in the lake is really huge. Trees fall into the water and people think, oh, I have to clean that up and it's tidy. But if you're a fisherman, an angler, when you see that kind of cover in the water, that's where the fish are.
Yeah.
So it's really important fish habitat. And then I loved your point about how the phosphorus, the nutrient loading of the lake, really can contribute to the spread of aquatic invasive species like milfoil, because that's a big deal. You know, we're kind of there's we have a member on Lake Vermilion, and he's back in a back bay, and I end up there sometimes, and they're on a big hill, and they have a wide lot that's maybe half of this little bay, and it's grass right down to the water, not a weed in it, just lawn on a very steep slope. Uh, and he gets algae in the bay, and he emails me and says, "Well, I got can we do anything about this algae in the bay?" And I keep saying, "Well, are you fertilizing your lawn? Because it's ending up in the lake and it's supercharging, that area because it's very calm there." Paul says you're changing the social norm in your neighborhood and on the lake in a positive way. You made my day.
Oh, that's really, really kind.
Paul, what I know you've done some of this work. Is it what percentage of a shoreline can be developed before it starts to impact water quality in the lake. I want to say it's, well, I'm not going to remember. I thought it was 70. I know it's 75% forest cover in a watershed to protect water quality, kind of upstream. But I know Paul had actually gone around and mapped lakeshore and how much of it was developed and how much of it was wild. So we'll wait for that. Does anybody else have any questions on this? Our As Dorothy and I talked, I got excited when I heard what she was doing, and she's agreed to be available to help export this Gull Lake program to lake associations around the state. I think it'd be a pretty easy thing to set up. And you can email either Dorothy at lakesteward@gcola.org, or you can email me and we can get you hooked up. And I'll make this recording of this available. And it's relatively short, so it could be a pretty decent pitch to a lake association board if you want to explain what it is you want to do. Paul says just a small percentage change results in changes in water quality, about 10% impervious. Investigators found that loss of 25% of the forest in a lake's watershed resulted in reductions of lake water quality. So lots of trees, more deep-rooted plants is really the key thing.
I was
And
thinking about having something people could recognize. Like last year at our gala, I actually was thinking about making a lapel pin for myself that was a dandelion, allowing dandelions to grow. And then one of the things that helped me change over my lakeshore was I took a white plastic stake and I marched out there and I stuck it in the ground at 25 feet. And then every day I had to look at that stupid stake, and I started having, mowing around it and making a bigger and bigger buffer. But I just couldn't, you couldn't get rid of the problem because the darn stake was there all the time. It looked like you had to do something. So that would be something that would be fun to give away to people who have low scores, who are lost. Like, what do I do? You give them 3 plastic stakes. They're $1 a piece. Go out and stick them in your yard. And then every day they're like, I know I got to do something about this. Because let's face it, we have a lot of other things on our minds too.
did you do any planting, or did you just stop mowing and then these plants came up?
I stopped mowing until we launched this program last year, and then I did do a shoreline restoration. So I do know what that's about. And um, so that was a big change. And, you do need to do that to make the buffer good. But here's the point. Jeff, you had said something about the short roots of the grass, but yet I think if people would stop mowing, that would get them started. You have to start somewhere. And it is a bit of a gradual process to win your mind over and then to actually do something. It's taken me, this is now 6 years, because it was 2014 when I first did Rate Your Shoreland. And I've kind of agonized over it all these years. And then, of course, you've got to convince my husband. And I kept talking about it, and finally, I don't know why, he either just gave up but he tells me he's sold on it now. He doesn't want the lake to have all those nutrients in it. He's with me. So I think that's another thing we can do to get, it's the other people in the home. If they're extended families, sometimes people don't want to agree together, but it's a way to get it launched.
Jenny Treadway asks, what about a sandy beach that is 25 feet? Does that benefit?
There's a difference between a natural sandy beach and when you dump sand on it. But even if you bring in sand, if it's only 25 feet, we let that go. I mean, whatever you have. Some people have boathouses. or whatever. But if you have a 25-foot wide boathouse and you also have, say, a deck right on the water that's 25 feet also, then you wouldn't qualify. And we don't want people to get the idea that that's great and those people are lake stewards. We don't want the sign out there proclaiming that.
Right.
So,
Right. Were you able to connect when you did your shoreline restoration? Did you connect with the Soil and Water Conservation District or the Watershed District? And was there any were there any matching grants available to cost share your
oh, yeah.
work?
It was great. Actually, Sheila had told me that it was easy to do shoreline restoration, and I thought that was, nonsense. I mean, it's a huge project. But actually, it was pretty easy. We called a landscaper who did that kind of thing. They came out with a plan. They emailed it to me, and after they carried it out, once we had paid, I submitted the plan to Cass County, and they gave me half of it back, half of the project costs. And then, so far I was only paying half, and then I went to our Lakes Association and was able to get another quarter of it paid for. So I only paid for 1/4 of the total cost. Now you still have skin in the game. You got to come up with some money. So, and I think shoreline restoration is a big leap for some people. But if you can start talking about not mowing, when you don't mow your lawn, you look out and there it is. It's not mowed. And if you've always mowed your lawn, it's hitting you in the face every day. So you start thinking, well, gee, what can I do that's really good for the lake?
Yes. Well, and last year we in our newsletter published a list of plants from a native plant specialist who did a survey of shoreline plants in a time of drought and which plants were still surviving, and then went back and did it in a time of flooding. So the flood came in, and then after the flood receded, she, looked at which plants were still surviving, and she made a list. And there were some plants that did well both during floods and droughts, and so there are plants that are just really, really resilient that you can use on your shoreline, and they flower and they're lovely and they get a lot of wildlife habitat. Um, Michelle Browner says, Dorothy, what a wonderful presentation. I am glad to hear you will be sending the recording to the attendees since I share it with my Lake Association board members. Perfect.
Oh, that's
Uh,
great. Thank you.
yeah. Well, are there any other questions or do you have anything else you'd like to share? Oh, I think. Oh, did you freeze? Oh, okay. Um, well, then I guess we can. If there's no other questions, I don't know if people are typing now or not, but we can end there. It's a nice 45-minute presentation, and I'm so grateful to you for doing this, Dorothy.
My
And
pleasure.
in touch through the summer. Thank you, thank you,
Thank you, Jeff.
and
Appreciate
thank
it.
you all for your great book, Lakeshore Living. If you want to get deep into the weeds on this. Um, and thank you. Have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and everybody be well. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Best to you.